Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Football Fanatix, and as per usual, I'm your host Jack Rennie, and we've got a jam-packed episode for you today. Upcoming, we've got a conversation later around player and fan welfare with our reporter James Evans, who's always a delight to have with me in the studio, and of course, the famous head-to-head quiz between us two that always seems to get heated, or in other words, I always seem to win. But first up on the show today is someone very exciting for us, and it's an interview with Chorley FC player Billy Whitehouse, who's talking to us on his experience of mental health and injuries in football.
Hi Billy, hope you're doing well. I think the first thing to ask around the topic of mental health in football for players such as yourself is how hard is it mentally to battle back from an injury, and is it difficult to keep your frustrations inside when faced with time on the sidelines?
Quite difficult. I think it's really hard when obviously players are playing well in your position. You're quite paranoid about how long it's going to take you to get back fit. Are you going to be the same player when you come back? Depending on your injury, it can really affect what type of style of player you are. You might have to adapt to a different way of playing. So it's difficult. And I think your natural instinct is to try and rush back, which never works out. And I think you've just got to try and remain positive and be the best professional you can.
I don't think it's something people put to mind when they hear about a player's injury. It's normally moaning, oh, he's out again, and for how long? And no thought is actually put into how it can affect a person in their everyday life. So when faced with an injury, whether it be short or long term, what are the emotions you go through during the injury rehab process, and what facilities are in place for you to help at the club to help you recover?
I think the emotions you go through when you're going through rehab is, can I get back fit as fast as possible, which is obviously a positive one, but also can work out to be a negative. Gutted because you're off the pitch, you're in a gym, stuck in a gym for a while, but I think, again, it's such a complex feeling being injured because, first of all, again, you want to get back fit as quick as possible. But you also know that you've got to do things right. I read a quote once about, not having friends when you're going through a tough time, because it's great having friends, but they'll tell you how good you are and don't worry about anything. You need allies around you who'll tell you how it is. If you're not doing things properly, if you're not living your life right. And I think that's so important.
As well as mental health during injuries, I was wondering if we could touch on the mental health of players at academy level as well. Obviously, we know football is a cutthroat industry, as it is, but it can be exceptionally cruel when at a club at an early age. I was wondering, what is your take on how clubs go about releasing players at an early age, and have you had any experience of this during your time as a player?
Again, speaking from experience, I left a big club, probably one of the biggest clubs in England, 6 years ago now, and from the moment I left, not one person spoke to me. I was in the deep end, didn't have a club for a season, till February, so nearly a season, and I had no help whatsoever. And that's from a big club who's in the Premier League now. And I think it's just so important that clubs do have a player care system, where players can be looked after, helped along the way, because it's a lonely place when you don't have a club, especially when you get released.
And finally, Billy, keeping on the mental health theme of young players, is there more clubs and the FA can do in supporting youngsters after they've been released by a club?
There should be something for two sides of it. I feel like the people who get released and don't have a club, there should be something where they can come in and train full time with a coach and a fitness coach and keep fit mentally and physically until they do find a club or do get a trial. I think that's so important to have something where they can keep that normality as much as possible. Again, speaking from when I didn't have a club for nearly a year, it was a lonely place, and I had a lot of really good people around me, but if I didn't have them, I think I would have gone under a little bit. I wouldn't be where I am today without them.
Thanks, Billy. It's been great to have you on the podcast. Good luck for the rest of the season. Back to you in the studio, Jack.
I think that's a very interesting conversation for you at home and for us to do as well. I'm happy to say that I've now been joined back in the studio by James. So obviously, how did you find that interview? Obviously, there was some hard-hitting stuff in there.
Yeah, obviously I've done quite a lot of interviews on this show, but that is honestly up there on my favourites list.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And I'm sure our listeners did as well. Continuing the conversation on kind of which you had there, do you feel player welfare is taken into consideration enough in football in modern day?
Personally, I think it isn't taken as serious as it should be. When you look at incidents such as racism on social media, especially after the Euros last year, I think you've got to think, how can that not affect a player's well-being? And I'm aware that Twitter and Instagram are starting to crack down on these incidents, but they're still happening every other week, and something needs to be done about it now, because we're seeing like a racist gesture here and there every other week. That's just ridiculous, I think.
Yeah, I think, of course, you made an excellent point there, but kind of what's your take on what Billy was saying regarding the mental health of players in academies when they are released?
I do think it is difficult because obviously in the academy setup you can only have so many players progressing through to the senior squad. However, I do think that the problem lies where there's a clear disregard for the player when they're being released, in my personal experience. Because I had a friend from home when he was at the club academy, and he was there from around the age of 6 or 7, and he stayed there until 15, 16, which is where the cut-off point was for players when they could go through. And he didn't make it, and all he got was a tiny letter from the club saying, "Thanks for your time working with us." That's it, and that's where I have an issue with how they deal with releasing players.
What would kind of be the solution to the problem, and who's kind of accountable for the solution in your eyes?
In my opinion, I think there needs to be some sort of care package released for the effective players. Off the top of my head, I think it's Crystal Palace that have been the first team producing an aftercare programme, which lasts 3-4 years. And I think that's a brilliant idea, and more teams should definitely follow up with that. But I also think it is the job of the FA to come up with an idea where players are taken care of in some way after being released. What's your thoughts on it?
It is a cutthroat industry. So few players are going to get through, and I have here that for all the boys joining the pro academy at 9 years old, you've got 0.5% will even make a career out of football. And that's obviously the players already in a pro academy. So if you take 1.5 million youth players, which are currently playing in England, only 108 you're going to develop and play in the Premier League, which I think is quite shocking to see. And that was a report done by Player Scout just last year.
Wow.
Again, as you mentioned, what Crystal Palace are doing is brilliant, but it's so difficult for young players who have their life goals set on playing at a pro level, and finding out it isn't going to happen must be heartbreaking, especially at an early age. Obviously, moving on again, for today we've covered academy releases and mental health, but I want to move on to not just player welfare, but also fan welfare, and discuss your thoughts on the significant issue with fan emergencies at stadium and how these have been handled recently.
Yeah, first, I think that stat you've just said there is absolutely staggering. But I do think it's one of the most scary things to have happened this season with the fan emergencies that are going on, where people are going to games every Saturday and Sunday like they do every week and have been doing for every week from a young age. And unfortunately, people are leaving in ambulances, which is something we don't want to see. And it's a scary thought to have, because I go to a game every week, and sometimes I do get worried about what could happen in that game. And I'm sure it's forcing people not to go to games due to the worry. What's your take on it, and why do you think it's happening?
I think, obviously, I think as you touched on there, it's a frightening prospect. But I also think that, on the other side, it just goes to show the importance of basic CPR training nowadays. These incidents are obviously going to occur, sadly, and the most we can kind of do is prepare for it so we're well equipped. I think it was highlighted a lot more and became a lot more obvious during last year's Euros, when Christian Eriksen, obviously, where Simon Kjær was the player who effectively saved his life in what was truly shocking to see. What was obviously controversial was BBC's continued coverage of it, and what I think, obviously, and many other viewers believe as well, would be morally quite wrong. I was just wondering what kind of your perspective is on that as well, James.
Yeah, on that, I think it was shocking that they kept on the coverage, but watching the tragic incident with Eriksen was heart-wrenching at the Euros. Yeah. However, I do believe there's things we can learn from that. I think it's vital that basic first aid and CPR training is shown to certainly all adults, and even in school curriculum, as it could be taught, as at least everyone is prepared if such a tragic incident should happen again anywhere.
Yeah, of course, I agree with everything you've said there. Obviously, we went through all the stuff we were going to cover. Now it's time to end the show on a bit of a lighter note for our viewers listeners at home. It's time for everybody's favourite part, which is the weekly football quiz. If you haven't listened in before, it's where me and James have 30 seconds to answer as many questions correctly as we can. The weekly score, as it stands, is 11-2 in my favour. You don't realise it's that bad until you read it out. So I might let you win this one. Obviously, listeners at home, if you want to follow along and let us know how many you get right in today's fast-paced competition.
I like the fighting talk, but I think today's my day and I'm going to prove it now. And you can go first. 3, 2, 1. Who scored the winner for Atletico Madrid against Manchester United?
Renan Lodi.
Who will Rangers play in the quarter-finals of the Europa League?
It's Lyon.
What strange incident occurred at the Everton versus Newcastle game?
A fan tying himself to a goalpost.
Who's currently top of the Championship?
It's Fulham.
And who wears the number 9 shirt at Manchester City?
Who is it? It's Gabriel Jesus.
Not bad. 4 out of 5. You got number 2 wrong. It's Braga, not Lyon. I fancy it. I think I'm going to be alright.
Well, hopefully you can beat me today then. Just for today. Alright, so whenever you're ready, 3, 2, 1. Who drew Man City in today's Champions League draw?
Well, it's Atletico Madrid.
And who scored West Ham's extra time winner against Sevilla?
Yarmolenko.
What number does Edinson Cavani wear for Man U?
Number 21.
And which team requested their FA Cup game be played behind closed doors this weekend?
Was it Chelsea?
It was. And which player was challenged, resulting in Alan sending off last night against Newcastle?
Was St. Maximin. That's got to be a winner. That's a winner.
That's 5 out of 5, so that's back up to 11-3. The comeback's on. Obviously, that's the show over for today, guys. Thank you for listening here on Football Fanatix. I'll see you next week for our episode where we'll be discussing football ownership and money in football. I've been your host, Jack.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. See you next week.
See you later.